We are going to be talking about sound today. So this is going to be mostly about how you get your sound into a recording and eventually into streaming your recordings. And today we have a special guest who is a master of sound engineering, which I'm not. I learned some things from him, but we are going to be talking with him. He has recorded many people, and this is his name is Alex Venguer. And Alex Venguer, it's an engineer that has recorded all kinds of styles: folk, classical, pop, hip hop, Broadway, movies, R&B, so you name it, he did it. And he has recorded artists like Yo-Yo Ma, like John Legend, like I don't know, Lady Gaga, Woody Allen, Cassandra Wilson, Martha and Rufus Wainwright, John Patitucci. So again, you name it, he did it. And so Alex works in studios most of the times, and but sometimes he works at home doing mixing. So in the studio, he gets the sound of the musicians into the recording, then he takes it home and does his work um, to to make it sound better, even better than what it sounded in the studio. So here we see him dealing with these huge machines, which we are not going to be telling you to use today. Um, this is a recording with the Brooklyn Riders, you said? Okay. So, and here we see him in another session. So Alex says that when he records a song, he actually concentrates on the melody and the rhythm, and we will ask him about that later. But there is always something that you have to consider, that behind every great sound engineer, there is a better sound engineer. And here we see the truth of everything. This is Trufa, is the master engineer who does all the work in there. So now we are going to introduce to you Master of Sound Engineering, Alex Venguer. Hello, Alex. How are
Hi,
you?
how are you? Good to see you.
Very good. So
Welcome to everybody.
welcome to the Stowe Tango Music Festival Online. We are going to be talking about sound, and you will have your concepts of sound. So we will talk about what happens after you practice your instrument and you get good at it. So
Exactly.
I will let you introduce yourself and go ahead.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. And yeah, as Hector mentioned, with everybody being stuck at home, including us, of course, here, it's great to be able. It's a great era for recording yourself at home. Obviously, the quality of a studio is unmatched because you're dealing with great acoustics and everything. But the reality is, you can get a really great recording from your own home. And then if you get it mixed and mastered professionally, it can really be quite something. And it's a very different approach recording at home than recording in a studio, because you really are just fighting the acoustics. I even did a record years ago with some friends where we did the whole record, for her first record in the studio when I was still working at the studio and could kind of sneak in at night. And the second record where I was not working at the studio anymore and the budget was low, we did mostly in my apartment actually. And I learned a lot of big lessons there. Like, people assume that a dead room is better, but there needs to be some air, otherwise you just get gloomy. So having said that, it's totally doable, and it's just about learning the couple things you need and, trusting your ears, because, as musicians, how stuff needs to sound. One of the biggest things I've learned as a recording engineer and producer is precisely that, listen to your musicians. They wrote the music, they played the notes, and they know how it should sound. Obviously, everybody's open to creative cooperation between everybody, but trust your musicians, and since you guys are the musicians, trust your own ears and what you're looking for. That's kind of, the base.
So, Alex, when I met you many years ago, and I think I started to record at home in 2004 or 2005, something like that, and I think we started to get together from around that time.
Hmm.
So that's where I recorded my first CD, and I had to say I never recorded my own CDs in a studio. I always record from home. And one of the reasons was because I never liked the sound that the engineers will get from my bandoneon. Um, but I didn't know you at that time. So now is a different thing. So
Exactly.
why is it that you cannot get the sound that you want sometimes, and then how would you go about getting the sound from your instrument? What are you looking for when you listen to an instrument?
You listen to a couple of things. First, you kind of want to walk around the instrument, and this is something I still do. Even when I'm miking up a drum set, and I ask the player to, hit his kick, and I'll put my ear up to it, even though it's loud, and just hear around it. Same like with the bandoneon. Like one of the things is people would sometimes assume that bandoneon or an accordion you would mic from the front, but the reality you need to do the sides because that's where the sound comes from. So one of the things you're looking for is where the sound is coming from in an instrument, and it's very varied. Obviously, even within saxophones, there's the sound that comes from the bell versus the body. The body's warmer but a little moister. The bell itself is a little brighter, more attacky, and you get a little more of like the spit sound in it. And it's about finding a balance. Some people like putting one mic on the horn and one on the body. I mean, on the bell and the body, and then combining it. There's no right or wrong. It really is about finding what you're looking for, based on the style of music. Doing a rock record where you want to get a creative and fun sound like the Beatles used to do with one thing, but then doing something like a tango record with you where you really want the instrument just to shine. And you don't necessarily need one to be transparent and neutral in the way that you don't want to color instruments, because you do, and that's why you choose certain mics and certain microphone preamplifiers. But you're trying to just capture the instrument as it is and have it just sound like the real instrument. So that's you really just use your ears to see, okay, this is how it sounds. If I put a microphone here, how does it sound over the speakers? It's a little boomy. Okay, let me move back from it a little bit, because that's one of the things you learn through time. If you get closer to an instrument, the boominess comes out. So just with practice you start to learn all these things, and that's what you're looking for.
So when you say that the microphone gets boomy, I'm going to do a demonstration here.
Right.
So right now I'm a little bit of a distance between, let's say, maybe 10 inches from the microphone or so. But if I get here, maybe you can hear a little bit more of the low end of my voice.
Yeah, even through an iPad you can hear it.
Yeah. So these sometimes we get too close. So let's say you go here and then you start talking and then you start to hear pops in the so it's a balance. And you just said something very important that everybody should keep in mind. Trust your ears, the same when you play music.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the example of what you just said with the microphone, like sometimes the further away sound is the better sound that you want. But sometimes, like for example, the classic example would be somebody like Radiohead. The voice is very, has a lot of bottom. It's very close, and that's because he's probably singing to the mic here, right in his face. So you get that. Then obviously you have to control it so it doesn't distort, so you don't get the big plosives, all that kind of stuff. But it's all about again finding what you're looking for. And one of the biggest things in sound is that there's no right or wrong. It's just about the concept and how it sits in the middle of what you want to achieve.
So there is not right or wrong, but we are all confused. Yeah, we are all confused when we want to record. Then you start to research, and there is a lot of material on YouTube and everything. But one of the reasons why I want to have you is because we can get something that we say, okay, this works, this sounds good, and from there you can start playing with it and you can start finding different colors.
Yes.
But so we talked today about the different components of the recording. So you have your instrument, you practice, you play well, then you have to capture that sound, and after you capture that sound, you had to print it in a machine.
Yes.
And then you publish it. and
Exactly.
you have to listen. So it's
Two
that
steps to
simple.
get money from Spotify.
It's very simple. It's
Yeah.
nothing complicated. So let's break it down then. Let's start talking about microphones. So
Well,
most of the
actually, I'm
people,
gonna go before microphones. I'm gonna go with software, if that's okay with you,
okay, sure.
because that's you have to that's really where the concept comes from. You need something to record, to be it your iPhone and notes, or a tape machine like they used to. And what's great about these days is that you have options about different software that you can go from like free all the way to decently priced, but an investment. And they all do the same thing pretty much. It's just about how many options they give you about how to do it, how they process, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously the more expensive ones give you more options. But I've been doing, especially now with isolation, I've been doing some stuff with some projects where like people just record into their laptop using the free software, and it works great. So I'm gonna go with like 3 levels of things, which is the first one is stuff like Soundtrap. It's an application that Spotify just put out actually, and it's very hip. It's basically a recorder where it has many tracks and you can record one instrument at a time. And it's based out of your computer on Safari. Like you don't even need to use extra software. You just like go on Safari or Firefox or whatever browser you use and log into it, and then you can share the session with somebody else over the internet. Everything gets stored in the cloud. Soundtrack, exactly. And it works great. There's less options, like you can only record a certain quality and that kind of stuff, but it does the trick. It works pretty well. Then you can go up one step into what Apple gives you, GarageBand. I think it comes for free with
yes,
Max, I believe, and it's based out of Logic, which was a very powerful. It still is a very powerful recording DAW. DAW, by the way, means digital audio workstation.
I
And
want to I want to interrupt a little bit. I want to ask you something about. You say that GarageBand and Logic are related. So GarageBand is a free version of powerful tool like Logic. For
correct.
somebody like us that record acoustic instruments, is there any difference in the quality that it will come out of the sound with GarageBand or Logic?
Yes, there is. Because GarageBand, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be because I've got to be honest, I've never used GarageBand. I believe you can only do up to 48 kilohertz recording, and we'll get into what
And
that means.
we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Whereas if you're in Logic, you can go 88.2, which is, or 96K or even higher. So you're technically getting better quality. Having said that, CDs, which is considered decent quality, is 44.1 16-bit. So you're still getting good quality in GarageBand. The processing is the same. Once you've recorded, like if you recorded in GarageBand or in Logic or Pro Tools at the same quality, then no, it's the same.
So let's say
zeros.
To knock the first part out. So use GarageBand until you know how to manage the software, and then if you want to go forward and spend money, then you can go to Pro Tools or Logic.
And if you want something even simpler than GarageBand, there's Soundtrap, and there's the one that you told me. I have it written down here. Audio
Tools. And actually I used it with Sophia. That Sophia is somewhere in there, and we did a collaboration where she recorded and I did some put some effects in there, some reverb, and it's really cool because immediately you get the feedback. Yeah,
it works really, really great. And at the end of the day, different softwares are a bit, like, for example, Logic is a little more biased towards production, whereas Pro Tools is a bit more biased towards real engineering and thought, more like a multi-track machine. But they all kind of meet in the middle, and there's so many others. There's Digital Performer, there's Cubase, et cetera, et cetera.
So somebody asked a question about Reaper. If you have any,
I don't have any experience with it myself, but yeah, I mean, it does the same thing, so it's fine. It works perfectly well.
I know that
somebody asked.
Yeah, I know that we have another question about mic placement. We will get to that later. So, are we done with software for now?
That's the first part. You need something to record to. That's the most. If you don't have anywhere to record to, you're not gonna get anywhere with this. Then yes, like you said, microphones, right? And I did a little sheet that I think everybody will be getting a PDF that will have, a couple of recommendations of different budgets of microphones. But the idea is there's three basic types of microphones. You got dynamics, condensers, and ribbon. And I have some of mine here that I can show you in a second.
Yeah, I can. I have
And
also, if you don't mind, I'm going to put
yeah,
in my screen
yeah, go for it.
yeah, whenever you can keep talking and I will find it.
Perfect. Yeah. So dynamic mics are typically considered the cheapest, though not the worst. They're based on a type of engineering where they can handle very high sound sources, and so like they're great. Like for example, the classic SM57 is a microphone that's only $100 and it's been in
Yeah.
records all over the world. I believe
I
that's probably the next
I
one
can
coming.
show you now. Yeah, there you can actually block that so we can show the microphones in here. So you started before you told me about the USB mics.
Oh right, yeah. Sorry, I skipped that. My bad. Still new to these kind of
Okay.
things. So yes, before getting into buying, microphones that you use with an interface and need a microphone preamplifier and that kind of stuff, we talked about, there's some microphones nowadays that work great, like the one Hector's using right now for his voice, that are actually USB based, and all you do is plug it to your USB in your computer, and you can record direct, and they're pretty great. I mean, Apogee, I just recommended one to a singer, an Apogee one that's I believe like $230, and I was impressed at the quality of the sound of her in her house with it. It was really quite stunning. So
So
there's those.
yeah, I was going to tell you that the microphone that I'm using is a Blue Yeti, and mine is not the Pro version. So this one is a USB microphone, but the Pro version comes with USB and also comes with XLR. So if you're going to transition into a interface, then you have the two possibilities to use the
Right,
XLR
you have the
or
option.
USB. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So and these mics are great for what they do, and if you get that, you can just like record straight into GarageBand or into Soundtrap with it, and not have to worry about much with them. It's really just straight ahead. You put it up and connect it, and the computer sees it, and you speak into it.
Mm-hmm.
Then moving on, we have dynamics. This is the SM57, and like I said, this is a $100 microphone that's on most records you've ever heard in your life. It's like the classic snare microphone, the most common microphone used on electric guitars, on the amp. It's very common on vocals, etc., etc. So it's a great sounding mic for $100. There's other kinds of dynamics that just each one has a bit of a tonal difference, and then you move up to condensers. Like this one, this is a pencil condenser. The thing that's different between condensers and dynamics is that they're different builds in terms of how they capture sound. They work differently. Condensers are much more precise, have more lows and more highs typically, so they're a little more detailed, which is not always a good thing. Sometimes you want something a little less detailed as the right sound. Also, condensers tend to overload quicker, though many have pads, so you can actually put it in a snare and turn the pad on, which brings the volume down on it. Condensers do need a source of power though, just so you guys know. And there can be in two ways. It can be phantom power that is given by your either console or an interface or mic pre, or in the case of old vintage or modern tube microphones, the tube provides the power.
So there is also different sizes of condensers.
Correct. There's small and large, small diaphragm and large diaphragm condensers, and they each have their different qualities. Typically, one thinks of small condensers as very fast microphones. I think they capture every transient really, really precisely because they're actually moving less metal because the capsule is smaller. So they're great on like strummy acoustic guitars. They're great on overheads, percussion, that kind of stuff. And then the large ones are considered usually a little mellower sound because it moves a lot more metal. So it actually, the top end gets reduced slightly. I mean, and we're talking almost nothing here. And so they're, preferred for vocals. They're, great on a string section, et cetera, et cetera. Having said that, you can use both on both. And I do all the time,
I was going to ask you about that. I have never seen a singer use a small condenser.
There's a very famous picture of John Lennon on the floor singing with a small condenser, a small Neumann. He wanted to sing lying down, and the engineer figured it was too annoying to get a big, heavy, large diaphragm condenser on a stand, so he used a small one. and
Yeah,
it works great.
great. So we move on to
Ribbons, yes. And ribbons are I might be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. They were the first kind of microphones built, I believe. Well, no, second, because they had the carbon ones that are not really used anymore first. But of these three main types, ribbons I believe are the oldest design. And it's basically a very, very small ribbon that just moves with the air, and they're very delicate. And what they do is that they're very natural sounding. They're, of all the three, they're probably the most natural sounding. They can be a little bit thick in the mid range and a little dark depending on the model, but they just really just sound very natural. And one of the reasons is that they're actually figure eight by nature, which means that they pick up from the front and the back, and that just gives it a more open sound, more natural sound, because there's no phase cancellation, and we'll get into what that is. But basically, when a microphone only picks from the front, it means that it's canceling frequencies from the back, and that actually creates a bit of a natural, part of the sound, whereas these guys don't.
so this one. I know that there are different type of rival microphones, but which you said that is a little bit heavy on the mid range. Give
Mhm.
us an example of what instrument would you use a microphone like this?
They're great on trumpet, for example,
Hmm.
like so good. Or like if you have a drummer that hits the cymbals very hard, they're great on that. If you have a very bright singer, the ribbons can be wonderful. Um,
So basically, if the source is bright, you might use one of these microphones.
exactly, yeah.
So
Or
when, yep.
even, sorry to interrupt, yeah, even sometimes there's other qualities that are great about it, where you might say, still let's use it, and then we'll just add top end in the mix. Um, so that can also be something to consider. One of the nice things about ribbons is that even though they're a little duller on the top end, they take equalization very nicely. So you
Hmm.
can always add that top end. So I would not say that because you're looking, they're great on cellos, and cellos are not particularly bright. They can be great on acoustic bass as well.
Hmm. Okay. So why do we have this in between the microphones?
That is basically the microphone preamplifier is what you use to get the level of your microphone into the recording. So as you can see in this, you see that little button at the top that says plus 48V. That's what gives phantom power, which gives the power to the microphones if you're using condensers. Or over the last couple of years, they've started putting out a lot of active ribbon mics, which means that they get more level, but they need phantom. So basically, this is just a volume knob, is what it is, and different brands just have different qualities and different tones. So you can use it creatively as well as just as a tool. And but it basically is that it's just the volume of your microphone.
So this way, many people will sign out right now. This piece of equipment is $4,000.
Yes.
That's the price. So we are not thinking into spend $4,000 to record at home. Do we
No,
need the microphone preamplifier?
you do not. What you do need to get is an interface of sorts. Unless you're using a USB microphone, you need to get some sort of interface. We have, for example, the Focusrite Scarlett series is very, very highly recommended. Apogee has some great ones. There's tons of them. And usually most of these interfaces come with a microphone preamplifier or more than one. A lot of them come with two or
I
four.
actually, I actually have an example of one of those.
Oh,
We'll go back to the other ones.
yeah, there
So
we go.
this is the Apogee, is it?
No, that's
No,
the
Focusrite.
yeah.
Focusrite. Yeah. So this is a two channels
Mm-hmm.
interface. There are
Exactly. You can see how it has, the microphone inputs. You also have the 48-volt buttons for phantom power. And what this does is this connects to your computer, usually via USB at this point, or Thunderbolt. Older ones use FireWire. And it converts the signal from analog to digital, basically, and back from digital to analog so you can hear it again. So this is basically what connects the outside world to the computer and back. And
okay.
they have great
So
mic presets.
so let's it has a mic pre incorporated. It has the interface incorporated. It might not be as high of a quality of the Millennium $4,000 piece, but it has great sound. You can get
Yes.
great sound, and
So
and if you're, for example, a violin player, um, you will buy one with 2 channels, 4 channels, 1 channel.
I would say in general, I mean, for violin, I would just need one, but I
Mhm.
would generally recommend people get, two, because that way you just, the difference in price is usually low enough that it's worth having that extra one for, if someday in the future, when we can all get together, somebody comes to your house and you want to do a duet, you have the option of having two.
Yeah.
But
So
you only need one for that.
so far we have, if you're going to be in the low level, to start not putting too much money and start getting your feet wet. That's what they say. Um, GarageBand or any of the other free softwares and an interface like this,
Yeah,
and then in between you will have a microphone that
exactly.
you can choose a condenser. But there are microphones that will not work with this type of interfaces, or at least you will not spend the money to make it work with this interface.
Well, I actually think there's not that, as long as you have a decent interface, which most are these days, like unless you have something really cheap like a Behringer or a Mackie interface, something like that. As long as your Focusrite, Apogee, UAD, Orion, something like that, you're really better off probably spending more money on a better microphone and skipping the mic pre and using the internal mic pre's from the interface. Actually,
Okay,
um,
so I have another person that says a 4-track mixer may work. Now, I went through this a little bit, and a mixer, use a mixer as an interface. There are 2 types of mixers. There's a mixer that is the analog mixer, and there is a mixer that is a digital mixer.
mhm.
So analog mixer will get the source in there. Let's say you have 4 channels, you can put 4 instruments in there, but it comes out as 2 instruments, as 2 tracks
That's the channels.
and 2 channels. So it will be in a stereo channel. So that
Mhm.
means that once you get it into the computer, you can't change things around. So
Correct.
you get the source in there, you put in a little bit of EQ, you get your microphone, it goes into the computer, it's done. You can add
Yeah.
some reverb or something like that, but not retouch the levels of the
No, the
instrument.
balance between the mics is the same.
Now, there are digital mixers which will send the information to the computer in different channels. If you have 8 instruments, it will get into 8 different tracks, and then you can
Yeah.
manage the levels. But here's an interesting question that I came across, and I think I talked to you. Um, what's the difference between a mixer, digital mixer, and an interface?
Well, digital mixer is going to actually have usually faders so that you can actually do stuff with your hands at the moment, whereas an interface is really just the connection. Any digital mixer is an interface in itself, but not every interface is a mixer. The mixer, when you're just using the interface, is your DAW, your program, is where you mix. But with the actual digital mixer, it comes with the interface which communicates with the computer. But you also have the option of using faders and pan pots to get to choose this goes left, this goes right, add a little reverb. That's the difference. It's that one of them is basically the other. A mixer is an interface, a digital mixer at that.
So now watch out for this one, because there is a mixer, digital mixer called L8 by, I think it's Presonus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe it's Presonus. I don't remember very
Let
well.
me see.
It's a digital mixer that costs about $300.
Uh-huh.
But the same company has an interface that will have less channels, and it will be much more money than the digital mixer. So if I have more possibilities with the digital mixer, you will say, well, it makes sense to buy the digital mixer for less money than an audio interface. So you can have all the faders and manage everything. But what would you be um, thinking when you pay less money for something that has more features?
Well, two things. The first is, do I need those features? Because the scope of what we're talking about today is recording at home, and there really is no need for a mixer at home, because if you're just recording, like even in the case where, like, let's say, it's 2 people in the house and you have 2 musicians and you want to record 2 people at the same time, it's one per microphone and you get one into each channel. So really, there's no need for a mixer at home for recording. You're not going to gain anything with it. So for starters, I wouldn't recommend it for that reason. But really, to answer your question, is that usually when you get more features for less money, it's because the quality is lower. So like, for example, the interface I use is 32 channels in and out and no microphone preamplifiers. And it costs a certain amount. And then there's another one that costs just slightly more, but has a bunch of mic pre's as well. And so, I know that this one's a better quality because it doesn't have to spend extra money on adding mic pre's as well as just line inputs. So that's what it comes down to, more features should cost more money. And if it doesn't, it means that they had to make them cheaper.
Yeah, so probably the mic preamps on the L8 are not going to be the same.
Yeah, PreSonus is not one of those brands that I would recommend as, it'll work, it's fine. But, it's not at the level of Focusrite, Apogee, anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we didn't talk about the high-end microphones, and I know that most of the people will not be interested in purchasing a microphone for $4,000.
Right.
But that being said, I would like to actually show some of those microphones, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course.
And there's that list that, everybody will get, which has a couple of their commendations of microphones. I try to keep it all within, lower budgets to not go crazy on anybody. No $30,000 microphones in there.
Okay. So, good. So you will get this PDF with all the list. If you are interested in buying a $4,000 microphone, this is what I will suggest. Either you know a lot about sound engineering, or you call Alex to ask him some advice before you spend the $4,000.
Yes, exactly.
So, okay, I was going to read a message, but there's an internal message between Jisoo and me. If it doesn't work, don't bother. Okay, so moving on.
So now the other thing to talk about microphones, and this is important for home recording particularly. I mean, it's also very important in the studio. There's three basic types of patterns. There's cardioid, which means that it only picks up from the front. There's figure eight, like I said about the ribbons, that where it picks from the front and the back. And then there's omnidirectional, which means that they pick all around the microphone. And it's not that it's magic, and if it's cardioid, it only picks up from the front and nothing from the rear. It does pick up a little bit, but the sound is much reduced from the back on a cardioid. And then there's also the options of hypercardioid, which means that a cardioid that's just more extreme, or there's some microphones where you don't even have to choose the pattern, where you can actually it'll have markings for figure eight and omni, and you can actually move a knob to find anywhere in between those. And this is something that's important when it comes to home recording, because you want to make one of the big things about home recording is you want to kind of disappear your room as much as possible, because most of us don't live in a house that's treated acoustically like a studio.
Not many people have the
your basement. No,
my basement. Yeah,
no, not many people have that basement, unfortunately. So generally you want to start looking for microphones that are cardioid is your best bet, unless you're going for ribbons, because if you're going for ribbon, then there's not much you can do about it, with the exception of one microphone, which I have here is one of my favorite new microphones. This is a ribbon, but as opposed to like these ribbons, which pick up from the front and the back, you can see how it's got a grill that's open on both sides and the ribbons in there. This one only picks up from the front, and it's hypercardioid. So, this is something I would suggest very much for home more than the other ones. But if you want one of the regular Royers, which are figure eight, it'll work well. But, if you're staying within condensers and dynamics, I do recommend just going for cardioid first, because there's no point in using an omnidirectional mic or figure eight in a house where acoustics are going to be a problem.
Yeah, basically, when you're recording your instrument at home, you will have walls, you will have bookshelves, you will have sofas, you will have all kinds of things. And what happens is you have the frequencies traveling into whatever piece of furniture or the wall, and those frequencies will travel back, and that
Exactly.
is what the microphone will pick up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's what you want to avoid. All the bouncing back and forth in the room. Especially in smaller rooms. And also, just like walls and mirrors, televisions, computer screens, all that kind of stuff bounce sound back. Beds, couches, that kind of thing actually absorb some of the sound. And what you want to find is, if you're going to record in your house, is you want to find the room that's the most in the middle. You don't want anything that's too dead, because it'll just start sounding literally like there's no air around your recordings, which is what we discovered when we recorded that whole apartment. I mean, that whole record in my apartment. When I came to mix it, everything just felt so dark in a bad way. But also, you don't want it to be so live that it just gets blurry sounding and, bright and annoying and thin. So what you want to do is find a room that's, a decent size, not huge, not small, and that's balanced between carpets and walls, that kind of thing. And the other thing that you can think of is using blankets. Like every now and then, I don't do this much anymore, but in the past, like, people would call me like, hey, can we record this at your house, because there's no budget to go into a studio? I'm like, yeah, sure, and people would know what they were coming into, but it's not a studio, it's a house. And I would literally just put a big thick blanket behind my TV, on top of the TV, and put them with their back facing the TV. So that basically what you want to think about when you're choosing where to mic is, if this is your microphone and it's picking from the front, and let's say I'm a singer and I've got like this and it's going to pick up here, think about how the sound is, the microphone is picking up what's behind me as well. So I'm talking, the sound is coming forward, but then it's also bouncing back, especially if you're a loud singer. Obviously, that's not the case with speaking as much. And it's going to reverberate all around the room. And so the microphone is going to pick up all the stuff that's behind you, all the bounce back that went forward, back, and then into the mic again. So by putting a big blanket behind you in something like a TV screen or, a big chair or whatever, you're actually going to block up a lot of that sound coming into the microphone. And if you look at any, studio pictures of musicians singing, that's what they do. They usually have what they call a gobo behind them, which just kills the sound of the room a little bit. And then that's one of the big things. A lot of people think, when I want to stop sound from getting to a microphone, I'll be in front of the musician. And actually, you need one behind, because the microphone is picking up that, not in front of the musician.
I want to give some tip for people. There are acoustic treatments for your rooms that cost a lot of money, but one of the things that I use in my house is moving blankets. They are like $2 or $3 each blanket. They are big, and you can use that to.
That's what we use in studios.
Yeah,
all over professional studios. That's they have bunches and bunches of packing blankets, because that's what you put up. And even when I'm out of gobos, I'll grab mic stands and just drape them over, because they work perfectly great for that.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I have a few questions that I would like to take. One is about mixers, and this one I can answer to you. Would you recommend using a mixer or an interface for broadcasting? This is what I would recommend. Whenever you have your sound, you're going to broadcast, you have your sound, don't touch it. So whatever you don't need to do, don't do it. So set up your sound, leave it there, and use it just by playing your instrument. So in that case, I would not choose a digital mixer, although it looks cool, but it doesn't serve the purpose of.
Yeah, you're not. The only reason to do it is if you're in a broadcasting situation where you want to be able to mute somebody as you're going live, if you're doing live, that kind of thing. But, again, we're talking, like they would in a radio station. Most likely not the situation in home.
Which there are softwares that can do that. And
yeah, exactly. That's also true.
But if you want to do a lot of things that you have to switch the amount of people, or you have to switch many things, then sure, you can use a hardware like a mixer to do that.
Exactly.
There was another question that was about microphone from Sami Merdinian. I think I know this guy. Recording stereo. He says, recording stereo as opposed to mono for one instrument. If using two channels, do you use two of the same mic, or combine a ribbon with a condenser or something else?
If you want to do stereo, then you should use two of the same, because you want both sides of the stereo image. Think of stereo as just basically your left and your right. So, you want where your left ear doesn't sound different than your right ear, or rather hear different. So you want to try to use the same of types of microphones. Having said that, if you don't have them, you can get away with different ones. That's for true stereo. If you want to use two microphones, not for stereo, but for just different, like let's say you have a lot of people when you're recording like bass clarinet, for example, like to put one by the bell and one above, because the sound is so different and the instrument so large that unless you get pretty behind, pretty far back from the instrument, you don't really capture it all at once. And in that case, you don't need them to be the same at all. The one thing I would say is that unless you're recording an instrument that is considered something stereo, which would be a piano, which would be, a pair of overheads on a drum set, stuff like that, recording in stereo at home is probably a bad idea, because the idea of stereo is that you're recording a space. And you're probably, unless you have your basement, like you do, Hector, you probably don't want to capture your space. You actually want to avoid it, because most of our spaces at home are not treated for recording. So I would typically stay away from stereo unless there's a very specific reason for it. Similarly, I would also stay away from two microphones if there's no need. I don't know how many people know how sound works, but basically sound is just waves in the air. And if you have two microphones, let's say there's one here and one here, sound gets, or if I do it like this, let me see if that makes sense. I'm talking like this, sound gets to this one before it gets to the black one, right? But when I put them together in the computer and play them at the same time, let's say that the first one, the waveform's going like this, and it captured it at this point of its height. But then the waveform keeps going, and then the second one captured it here. When you sum those waves, some frequencies can either get accentuated or canceled out pretty much. And that's what we call being out of phase. And if that's the case, your instrument is just going to sound unnatural and either very boomy or very thin. So, unless you want to deal with that for a very specific reason, I would recommend one microphone.
So it record with one microphone if it's a source of mono source. And
if you're doing piano and like that,
if you're doing piano, you have different options, but we are not going to go over all the options because it will get too long. But basically, research for different options of stereo microphone. One will be.
I'll say this one thing just because it's a big thing. For example, this is a stereo ribbon, and you can see it's one microphone. You put in one stand. It has one connector that splits out into two, and so it's really great for stuff like piano. You just put it up, and there's one capsule picking up that way and one capsule picking up this way. So if you want to do stereo for whatever reason, I would suggest, so that you don't have problems with phase, going with a stereo microphone. It's just great. It makes life easy and just will kill problems away.
And those are very cheap. How much is a microphone like that?
That one is, I believe it's like $1,800.
$1,800, piece of cake.
Exactly, but there are really good ones that are cheaper.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing I was going to say about this is, I'll bring up the bandoneon because we're in tango land here. That's another example of an instrument that does need two microphones, but not in stereo. You're actually, because you need to pick up from the two sides of the instrument, you can't really pick it up with one properly. I mean, you can obviously put one mic in front and it'll sound like something, but it won't be a great capture. So in that case, you are dealing with two microphones, but you're not considering it a stereo source. Or if you had a piece of, like a pair of congas, you need two microphones as well, one per conga, and it's not necessarily stereo. So those are the couple of exceptions where I would say, yeah, you need two mics, obviously.
So to capture, for example, your voice while you're talking and to capture your baby, are you going to use two microphones or one microphone?
One mic.
So Alex, how old is your baby now?
He's 6 months exactly this week. So, he's happily making noise outside.
So you're having a lot of fun, and and we interrupted your possible nap today. But anyway,
so it is.
I would like to answer also another couple of questions here. Chiyu says, I'd love to know any tips on suggestions on using microphones that clip on the instrument, like Audio-Technica Pro 35. I believe many bando players have this model for live gigs. I think this question has two parts. One, I can answer it, and the other one, you can answer it, about the clip microphone. Go ahead.
I mean, especially if you're talking about high quality mics like Audio Technica or DPA, they're great. And if you already have one from your work that you do live, by all means, give it a go and see how that sounds through an interface into recording. It'll do the job just perfectly well. They're really great microphones.
Now, from my point of view, talking about the bandoneon, I do not like clip microphones because they chase you. They follow you everywhere. So, for example, as bandoneon players, our instrument it's facing to the sides. So if we want to project to an audience, and we are playing a melody on the right hand, we will turn a little bit to the right for people to be able to hear our melody more than the left hand. If you have a clip-on microphone, that microphone will follow you, and there is no way that you can separate the sound and project in different ways.
Right.
So
yeah. Having said that, that's for probably live. If you're at home and you have them, give them a try. And I will say this, it's not something that I have a lot of experience with because we don't use them much in the studio. So I've mixed a couple of things where they're on them, but it's not my area of expertise because I don't do any live sound. But they're great microphones, and if you have them, try them before you spend money in another microphone, I think.
So Alex Royman says, in the broadcast situation, blankets won't look great. Would a heavy curtain do the trick? Yes, the curtain will do the trick, but there are also very nice blankets out there.
Yes. Yeah, a curtain will do just fine. Anything that's thick and cloth will do.
So here, these questions, I don't know if I understand correctly. So how do you combine the two mics for a band? Are you talking about the bandoneon, Jessica? Just say yes on the chat room. Yes. Okay. So for a bandoneon, yes, you can use two microphones. And the thing is that you're working with two different instruments. You're working with the right hand and you're working with the left hand, which sound completely different. And it's a different source. It's not the same source that mixes together. And again, you have the microphones on the side and the bandoneon in between. If you're going to record an accordion, I believe, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, and you have the microphones from the front, then you will have a different situation.
Actually, with accordion, you do the same. You do the sides as well.
No,
it's a little more angled. Yeah, completely different. Same instrument. I'm gonna get booted out of here. No, one of the important things about bandoneon, I think, and this is to some extent true about the accordion, but not quite as much, is that when I'm mixing anything with bandoneon or recording it, I almost think of it as two players. And each player gets its own mic because they really are two hands that at times are completely doing different things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have another question about two microphones, and here is Pavel, and Pavel is it's an amazing clarinetist. He is studying with my son. Actually, cool. No, it's the opposite.
Opposite.
Yeah. So and he has a situation where he plays music with his wife. They play piano and clarinet, and they want to work it out to record in a small apartment. Let alone the living situation, but recording, can we solve that?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a way. There's three ways around it. One of them would be get the stereo mic and just put it up and play with where you stand. Again, in terms of your position against the microphone and where the microphone is versus the piano, and just do a couple tests. Again, trust your ears, and just put the microphone a couple feet away from the piano. And then stand somewhere in between the piano and the microphone and record, 30 seconds, go listen to it and be like, oh, you know what, the accordion's way too loud. Step back a few steps. Or it's too soft, come back a little closer. That's assuming that you have a living space where, the piano and the clarinet sound decent, it's because at that point you are capturing a stereo recording of the room and you want to have control over balance between one and the other. But that is the simplest form to do it, obviously. And depending on your room, it can work great or terrible. That really depends on your acoustics. Another option would be to get that microphone or something similar for the piano and then get a third mic for the clarinet and then record on 3 channels, a stereo and a mono. And then you do have the balance. And in that case, you'd just be, with clarinet at home, you probably want to be like, if I'm playing here, the mic wants to be around here. It's about a foot distance. I find that if we're home recording, about a foot or foot and a half is probably the average that works the best, because it's close enough to the instrument that you're not grabbing too much room, but it's not close enough that you're just not getting a natural sound of the instrument. Because that's one of the things, as you get closer to an instrument, it starts sounding less unnatural, which, like we said at the beginning of the chat today, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The classic sample is Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, where they put up, actually, I believe it was 57s, like right on the bridge of the strings, and it's a great sound. It's not your traditional natural sound, but it's a great sound. So that would be option number 2 for the clarinet and piano, doing that. And then number 3 would be to get 2 microphones, 2 cardioid microphones, one for the piano, and just keep it in mono. There will be a little bit of leakage from the clarinet, from the piano to the clarinet, and the clarinet to the piano. So there will be a little bit of an image between the two. But it really just comes down to listening and seeing, what works for what you want, depending on your space. I know it's a bit of a no answer, because it's basically depends on your space, but it really is like that. It's trust your ears, find a position for the clarinet that's, foot and a half away at most, and same for the piano, and then see how it balances out, unless you want to just go with the one mic and try to see if that works. Hope that sort of answered the question.
Mm-hmm. So I would like to say, Brad, Ray, you can hold to your question, because we are going to be talking about a little bit overview of mixing and mastering. Also, we have from Vincent, he is asking that he says that he has a 2005 dynamic cardioid that I'd like to record directly to a Zoom H4 recorder. How expensive of a preamp model would you recommend to generate clean sound for spoken word? Would you recommend a different model versus instrumental recording? So Zoom H4 is already has preamps in there.
I believe that's not a word that I know, because I don't use Zoom stuff generally, because that's not built for studios. But yeah, I believe they all already have mic pre's, right?
Yeah, so H4 has 2 mic preamps, and you can connect your microphone directly to that preamp. One of the things that would play a little bit is with the position of the mic, using a pop screen. If you are too close, and if you want to get more body in your voice, then you will need a pop screen, and that will go in front of your mic, so your voice doesn't hit that. But you say, and everybody will receive this document, that you can do that with the
you can do that
piece
at
of
home.
Wire.
Yeah, if you just grab an old coat hanger and, kind of like just twist it into a bit of a circular position. I'll actually show you a picture on Instagram that a friend of mine with whom I work a lot, the one who bought the Apogee mic, I told her how to do it, and she did, and it worked great. And you grab a pantyhose or something and just basically use it, anything with like a very delicate nylon. Let me find the picture. It'll take me 1 second, because it's worth looking at it.
While he's looking for that, the other thing that I will say, we were talking about these microphones that connect USB to your computer. Probably you should try that, because maybe you want to use your microphone. That's the point. Then yes, you can go through the H4 preamps, or you can go directly to a different. I will completely go to a different interface and not use the H4 for that. An interface that already has mic preamps.
Yeah, correct. Never mind, I cannot find it. But yeah, basically what you do is you grab an old coat hanger and pantyhose, and you can just create your own pop filter, or you can, order it from Sweetwater for their, don't spend the money on the one that's $80. Buy, the $13, $18 one, that's perfectly fine. Basically, all it needs to do is stop big plosives, like sounds from hitting the microphone and overloading it.
So she uses, she has an H4 and Zoom H4, and it does have a mic preamp and a phantom power. Yes, it does. So you can use condenser microphones. You can use many different kinds of microphone. And since it's a stereo source, one thing that I can say is the microphones that come with the H4, those are not good. Those don't produce a good sound. So if you play with different mics, yeah, I had the experience of connecting the Neumann's 184, KM-Y84, connecting them to the Zoom and recording it and quartet, the string quartet, and it sounds great.
Yeah,
So
I believe it.
So next, okay. So are we kind of done with microphones, or is there
Yeah, the only
anything?
other thing that I will say is just in case there's any bass players here, electric bass players, electric guitars or keyboards, DI boxes. You know, again, interfaces come with them. It's basically you plug in a quarter inch. I'll show you one here. You know, you just plug in here and then it comes out microphone level basically, and then this goes into your mic pre. So if you're doing electric bass and want to just go directly without using an amp or keyboards, you use something like this called a direct injunction box.
And that will totally solve the problem of the blankets and your room and everything else.
Don't have to deal with anything acoustics. Exactly. And they come in stereo as well, you know, if you're doing keyboards or anything that's you know, if you have a V kit that's stereo output drums.
So one of the things that always puzzles me is recording quality. All these numbers that are 44, 88, and then, you know, it depends on how many beats. And so can you tell us a little bit?
Yes. In order to understand what the numbers mean, you have to just understand how digital audio works. And basically what happens is you have two elements, sample rate and bit resolution or bit depth. Sample rate is basically when sound gets converted from analog to digital. Let's say you have a waveform going like this. Every number of times per second, it takes a snapshot of where the waveform is. So let's say if you're at 44.1 kilohertz, you're doing 44,100 snapshots per second. If you're at 96 kilohertz, you're doing 96,000 samples per second. And by sample, I mean the snapshot. So basically, that's what the first number is. How many times in a second does the computer take a snapshot of where the waveform is? And obviously, the more samples you get, the more accurate the sound is going to be. Because what happens is that in sound, in real sound, or even in cassette, vinyl, or tape, sound is completely continuous. You know, it gets recorded, transferred from audio in the world, which just moves consistently into electric voltage, current, I mean, and then or is applied as magnetism into tape. And so that's a constant sound. But if you're talking about digital, there's always going to be space between one sample and the next. And the computer has to interpolate and guess what that data would be. And one of those things where there's always space in between. So the more you sample, the more accurate the sound is going to be.
So when you say accurate, it's that something that I will perceive as smooth or with more definition in terms of like hear the highs more, or
more definition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, smooth depends on whether the sound is smooth or not, and whether the mics you captured with or not are smooth or not. But yeah, you're gonna get a better sense of the depth of the sound. You know, you're gonna get more ambient around the sound. And also one of the things to consider is once you move into mixing, if you have a higher quality, the processing that happens in mixing is done at a higher level than if you have lower quality. So that's sample rate. And you know, the standard ones are 44.1, 48, 88.2, 96, and then there's what is it, 172 and 190, 192 and 170. I'm bad at math. Whatever the double of 88.2 is. CDs, for example, are 44.1, which means that 44.1 is already great. You know, so many of the records we love and listen to were recorded at 44.1. So, you know, at home doing 44.1 is fine. If you can do 88.2 or even better, but one of the things to consider is it takes more space, it uses more CPU on your computer. So, you know, whether it's worth the advantage or not depends on your particular rig and situation. 48, 96, and 192 are typically considered audio for video or for visuals. So, you know, when you work on a movie soundtrack, if you're doing a commercial, anything like that, you usually stick to 48, 96, or 192. If you're doing audio for audio's sake, like a CD or DVDA, even those don't really exist anymore, traditionally you do 44.1, 88.2, or 176, I believe it is. Some people like to always record at 96 or 48 as opposed to 44 and 88. And some people do claim that they hear a difference. I personally don't. I think that the difference between 44.1 and 48 is so minimal that I don't really hear it. 44.1 versus 88.2 I do, for example. And I was just taught like that in school that, this is the standard for audio and this is the standard for audio for video. And since I don't hear a difference, I just stick to it that way. Something else to consider is if you're going to send this out to mix, or if you're recording for somebody else's project, just check with them, see what their sample rate is, and just do it at whatever they're doing. And then besides sample rate, you get bit resolution or bit depth. And basically every time a sample is taken, a snapshot, as I said, there's a bit word that just says, basically, if you think bottom to top, okay, where in the soundscape is the waveform? So you already took the images like this. Now you have to tell it where it is in this, in your y-axis. And the standards are 16, 24, and lately 32. Obviously, the higher bit resolution, the more depth you get, the more detail you get again. But again, 44.1 16 is the standard for CD. So as long as you're doing 44.1 16-bit, you're doing decent quality.
So I just want to remind everybody, because this is something that it sticks in my head, and I always am like, oh, what does it mean? What does it mean? So you have the X axle is the sample rate, and then the Y will be the bit rate.
Yeah.
So
and you can kind of think of it as time versus amplitude volume. It's a way of thinking of it. Sample rate is basically snapshotting across time, and bit resolution is snapshotting across where the waveform is. So that's quality. And I would say go with whatever the project requires in terms of if you're recording for somebody else, or talk to whoever's going to mix your project if you're saying to mix, and see what they like. And if not, just do the better quality that your computer will be able to handle properly. Don't drive yourself crazy doing 96K just because you heard it's better and suffer through your computer stopping every 5 seconds.
So Pablo Cigarribia says something very interesting that everybody will understand immediately. How does sample rate affect VST?
Well, I'll just say what a VST is first. VST as plugins are what you process sound within a computer in your DAW. Different programs use different types of software types, I guess is the word to say it. VST is the one that's used by Cubase, for example. AX is a typical one for Pro Tools. So this is general for plugins in general, not just VSTs. Sample rate affects it in that the more samples and the higher quality your audio is recorded at, the more data and information the plugin can process. So let's say you're using a VST compressor or equalizer to change your sound. By having more information, the equalizer is going to do a more exact job, to put it that way. So basically, it's just going to sound better with higher sampler rates.
And at the same time, we'll also mess up your system if you don't have a good computer. So always remember that the power of your computer affects affects whatever you can do, and you don't want to have the best take of your performance and being cut off by a message on the computer that says your hardware couldn't handle so much definition. So therefore you lost your recording. So we have now, I think we went through many questions, so the question and answer will get a little bit shorter later, but for now we have one more component of the whole chain of events that has to happen to have an amazing recording coming out to the audience. And this is something that you have been doing for many years, and it's mixing and mastering.
Yes. Well, technically I don't master. I just mix.
I know you have another guy that is Oscar Zambrano. He's an amazing mastering engineer.
Correct.
And you two do an amazing team in there. But what we don't have time to go over extreme amounts of information about mixing and mastering. And here's the thing: we are recording at home, and because we are the source of the sound that we are going to produce. So let's say you cannot get out of your house and you cannot go to a recording studio, so you have to record it at home.
Mm-hmm.
But when time comes to mixing and mastering, you can send those files to a mixing or mastering engineer that will do an amazing job. And I tell you this, I studied for by myself and bought books, YouTube videos, and tons of things about mixing and mastering. And every time I start playing, I said, this time I'm going to mix my CD. I don't want to even talk to Alex. No, that's not true. And I play with it and I get a decent job. But then I take it to Alex and I'm like, okay, let's just erase everything that I did before he finds out that I was playing with that.
Yeah.
So, why is it that, what's your secret besides Trufa?
Comes down to, the same secret as you have as to why you play the way you play. Practice, just time doing it. You learn your tricks through time, and it's like any other, as technical as it is, it's like any other art. Just the more you do it, the more you understand it and the better you get at it. And I'm certainly still, on my road to becoming a better mixer still. I still have days where I struggle with it and days that are good. But basically, yeah, mixing is something you can send out to do. And I typically recommend, not only because it's my job, but it's good not only because you get somebody who's very proficient at doing it, but also it's great to get somebody else who does not know the music and is not involved in the same way as you are, to give it an outside ear and be able to approach it differently. But yeah, mixing is basically the process where now that you've recorded all your instruments separately in multi-track, the mixing engineer will use volume, pan, which means left versus right, effects such as delays, which are echoes, reverb, which is makes space, equalization to change the tone of something, compression to change the dynamics, or effects such as distortion. Even that's a very common thing, is just use a little bit of distortion as a creative effect. To basically grab, let's think of mixing as a funnel. You have you're up to as many tracks as you have. It can be up to 900 or just 4, and you're basically going to bring it down to stereo, which is 2. So it's really a funnel where you're making space for everything. And one of the things you need to do is think, okay, so the voice, and this comes back to like that quote that I don't even know when I said that, but it is true. That I try to think about the melody and the rhythm mostly when mixing. Is there can be all these really cool things happening, but at the end of the day, the listener is going to be focusing on 2 things: how his body reacts to the rhythm of the song. So you want to make sure that the song hits you that way, especially if you're talking about rock, pop, anything that's very rhythmic,
Or
like that.
Tango as well.
I mean, it's a dance form, exactly. I mean, yeah, I guess that's totally true. You want it to hit your body in a way that it makes you react and move. So you want to make sure that the low end is the way it has to be, so that everything's present and the interactions between the different instruments come through to get a rhythm. And then second thing is the melody. That's what it hits you in a different emotional way. That's what sticks to your head and as a song. If it's something with lyrics, then you want to make sure that the lyrics are understood properly. So those are the 2 elements that you have to think of as in a mix. Like, okay, how do I make this song that has tons of elements and effects and little things, but I gotta focus on these 2 things and then build around them. And a lot of the questions that I get when people ask me about mixing is like, okay, so what do you start? Do you always start with drums? It's like, no, it depends. Like, I've tried to think of, okay, this song, what is the core of this song? And if it's drums, if it's like a heavy rock song where the drums are really driving, then yeah, it could be the drums. But if it's a folky song where it's mostly a guitarist who's singing, and then there's a drummer in the background just kind of, doing time, then no, the drums are probably going to be some of the last things that I do, because it's just a color. Really, the structure of the song comes from the guitar and the voice.
So what would be, can we tell us about in tango, what would you be focusing on?
Tango is a complicated one because really it's such an interaction between the instruments. But really you have to, I think the 3 basic things are the bass, because it's just the bottom end of your mix. So you need to have that as the, let's say, the table for your sound. And then depending on the kind of formation, it typically goes either to the piano or the bandoneon. And that depends on what kind of formation you have. Sometimes that's split between the 2 of them. And then usually, any other melodic instruments take place in the same way that the piano and the bandoneon will do their melodic part. So once you found that section, then bringing in the bandoneon melody, violin, clarinet, any other, even vocal, then that kind of falls on top of it.
Does whoever is the instrument or the player that pays you influence who are you going to be
I try
featuring?
not to, at least.
Okay, next time we'll have to
No,
talk
I don't
about
think
that.
so.
Okay, I have a question from oh, before I forget, one of the things that I really appreciate from mixing is the fact that they put things in the space. So when you listen to a mix, you hear all these instruments coming at you, but not from one place.
Right.
And so we are creating a virtual reality at the end because
Yep.
first of all we are trying to make the room sound good, so the instrument doesn't bounce into the walls. So that's already is we are modifying the reality of the room.
Yeah. You're trying to
And
make.
yeah, but I think the ultimate virtual reality is when you get to the mixing and you start using the equalizer to make something more sparkle or to make something with more body. And at the same time, you use reverb or delays to make people believe that you are in a different room than what you recorded.
Exactly.
So what is in your mind when you're doing that? What do you think about? Do you think, oh, this sounds so good because it has a lot of reverb, or you're trying to look for natural sound?
It again with my non-answers, it really depends. If I'm doing a tango recording, then usually I want to try to make it feel like everybody's in the same room, and I try to picture, okay, if they were playing live, how would they be standing, and kind of try to think of that and recreate it in a way. And one of the other things that's really important when you're talking about space is just panning. Besides reverb and delay, just sending, okay, the bass is gonna be down the middle, and then the bandoneon is gonna be slightly to the left, so his, right hand will be here and his left hand will be over there, and then the violinist will be on the other side of the bass player, and then the piano's kind of behind them, and you start moving with your pan pots to create that space. And then add reverb.
Oh,
phone call
okay.
that I just declined. There we go. Sorry, phone call. And so in that case where I'm recording, string quartet, and that kind of string quartet or something like that, you want to try to create like a natural sound. In the case of, a pop song, you might want to create a space that sounds like nothing that exists in this world, and you would approach it very differently. So, that first of all is I try to think what is it that I want to do with this song.
Okay, we have a question from Alex, and I don't know if it has to do with this that we are talking about. He says, "How do you manage, quote unquote, behind?"
I imagine that what they mean by that is depth perception.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tougher one. Obviously, first off, and this is a little against the idea of what I was speaking about. Negating the room is when you're recording in a studio, using the acoustic space and the microphone to try to find that space, because if you're in a beautiful acoustic space, you're able to microphone in a way where you're actually capturing some sense of three-dimensionality, where something doesn't just feel here. There's that space. But when it comes to mixing, and let's say your stuff that's recorded at home, delays are mostly what I use for that. The way our ear works and sound is basically, let's say I'm speaking to you, you're getting my direct voice in both your ears, slightly at different times because your head is tilted this way, so it's getting here faster than here. But then besides that, you're also hearing my voice reflect from every single wall around us, or lack of walls. And because that's also a thing, if there's no reflections, that informs your brain. So basically the ear and the brain calculate how long it takes each reflection to get and how many there are. And your brain just makes you feel like, okay, because the voice is coming directly in this time, and then 0.2 milliseconds later it's coming again on this other ear, and then 0.7 again here, and all these reflections are like that. it gives you the sense of where in a space and how far away a sound is. And so basically you're trying to emulate that while you're mixing. You use delays, like let's say I pan something over here, and then I send a delay to this side. So now my ears, when I'm mixing, is getting the direct sound here, and then a little bit of a delay here. And so that gives it a sense of, okay, it's closer to that side. And now as I start spreading the delay out, it thinks, okay, now it's taking more time for the sound to get to a wall and come back. So it starts feeling like it's further away from you. So that's how you manage it, basically. Obviously, that combined with reverb, and it also all comes down to the arrangement of the track. You know, there's some songs that I've mixed where there's so much stuff that you can't play with it, and there's just no options. But ideally, that's not the case.
Yeah, I think we cover everything that we wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to say when I play with the mixing, you start to do all these things that you just said, and at the end, it sounds horrible because you play so much with the sound that you ruin it. So
Yeah,
like separating, putting the highs in here, the lows in here, and then it sounds totally unnatural. And that's when somebody that has experience of doing that can produce a more natural sound. I want to tell everybody that if you have questions for Alex, or you have mixing or mastering, he will put you in touch with Oscar Zambrano for mastering. Um, but you can contact him. You will have the information in the PDF that you will get at the end.
feel
We
free to reach
also,
out with any questions.
yeah. So what we are going to do now, first of all, before I forget, for everybody who is here right now, we have a direct contact into Sweetwater, which is a company that sells very high-end equipment, and they have good prices. I think they have the best prices, but they also will give discounts to whoever registered for this talk. So we will send you the information of a person that you have to contact, and you can start purchasing your equipment. But don't do it if you're not sure what you get. Consult with somebody
Yeah,
before you spend your money. Um, let me see. Thank you so much from Elizabeth Rain.
you're welcome.
Don't leave yet because we'll have questions and answers. So we are going to open the video now if you want to ask a question. So go put your pants and come back, and we are going to have you ask the questions directly. So first type it on the chat, and we'll open your video to ask a question directly to Alex or to me.
I see somebody asking about phase between the two mics on bandoneon. Actually, can everybody hear me? I don't know if I'm on or not. If you want to write it in the chat. Okay, perfect. So I'll answer that while they figure something out. I'll just go through some answers here. Phase between the two mics on bandoneon, so they're facing each other. Yes, that is a thing similar, like if you have a snare and you put a mic on the top and the bottom. Mic pre's have a button called phase flip, and you can switch the phase 180 degrees. So a lot of times I do that on bandoneon. It's funny, again, since I try the bandoneon, think of it as two instruments almost. Sometimes it's not needed because they're really such separate sounds, and they sound is so direct on one side and the other that you don't get much leakage and bleed between one and the other. But in general, this is a general rule for recording, is checking phase is good. So, you know, I would see, plays the two mics, listen a bit, and then press the button for the phase flip and see if it gets better or worse. So that's how I would deal it. Going back, is there any easy mixing technique to make all the notes in a double bass track even dynamically if the live performance had varying dynamics? EC is relative. You know, you can just do volume automation and find a couple of notes that are either too loud or too soft and just bring them up or down. You can use a compressor. The danger with it is if it over compresses it, it's going to sound unnatural and very annoying. The larger question is, do you want to kill the dynamics of it? Depending, you know, maybe especially talking about recording at home, if you find that it's got a lot of dynamics that are very varied and you don't want it, maybe recording it and, you know, as Johnny said, having a soft touch just to have it a little more even. But plugin wise, I would use a compressor for that. But you don't want to just rely on a compressor and compress like crazy in order to do that, because then you'll suffer. The sound will suffer in other ways.